Welcome to The Explainer. So, what happens when the justice system, in a desperate attempt to catch a monster, makes a deal with another one? It's a terrifying question, and today we're breaking down the shocking case of Karla Homolka, a story that made an entire country question the very meaning of justice.
The Deal with the Devil. That's not just some dramatic movie title. That's what the press and pretty much everyone in Canada started calling the legal agreement at the heart of this case. It was a plea bargain that, to this day, just seems to defy all logic. 12 years. Just let that number sink in for a second. That was the prison sentence Karla Homolka received for her part in the torture, rape, and murder of two teenage girls. So the question that still echoes across Canada is, how? How on earth was that sentence even possible? To get that, we have to go back to the story prosecutors were told. So how did this all happen? Well, it really all boils down to the story that Karla Homolka told investigators, a story they believed, a story that would end up shaping the entire case and lead to this infamous deal that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
And this brings us right to the absolute core of the case, doesn't it? Was Karla Homolka this battered, terrified victim, forced into these horrible acts by her husband? Or was she a willing architect of these crimes? The answer the prosecution went with would turn out to be tragically, horribly wrong.
Homolka's whole story was, you could say, a masterpiece of manipulation. She painted this picture of herself as a terrified wife, just a pawn in her husband Paul Bernardo's twisted games. And the prosecution, well, they were desperate to put Bernardo away, and they bought it. They offered her a deal, plead guilty to manslaughter, get a light sentence, and in exchange, testify against him. So, according to Karla's version of events, this timeline of absolute terror was all orchestrated by one person, Paul Bernardo. He was the monster. He was the mastermind behind the abduction, torture, and murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. She even claimed he was the one responsible for the death of her very own sister Tammy. This was the narrative that got her that deal.
The deal was signed, sealed, and delivered on May 14, 1993. The prosecution thought they had their star witness. But just 4 days later, a bombshell was about to drop, a discovery that would completely expose the devastating lie at the very heart of this case. So you have to ask yourself, what if that whole story was just a lie? What if Karla Homolka wasn't a victim at all, but a monster in her own right? Well, the truth was about to come out, found by the most unlikely person imaginable, and it was going to be more shocking than anyone could have ever guessed. Hidden away in the couple's home, Bernardo's own lawyer found videotapes, 6 of them, and these tapes showed the gruesome, undeniable truth of what really happened to those poor girls. Now get this, the lawyer held on to them for months, a ticking time bomb that was about to blow the whole case wide open. When those tapes finally came out, it was an absolute revelation. They showed a side of Karla Homolka that no one had seen. This was not some unwilling accomplice. No way. The video showed her laughing, taunting, and actively participating in the torture. The story of the battered wife was a complete and utter lie. And here's the real kicker. By the time the prosecution finally got their hands on those tapes, it was too late. The deal was done. It was legally binding, ironclad. The justice system was locked into this unbreakable agreement with a monster, and there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it. You can just imagine the reaction, right? When the truth about the tapes got out, it sparked this firestorm of outrage all across Canada. People were horrified, not just by the crimes themselves, but by the fact that one of the killers was essentially getting away with it. The deal with the devil had put the entire Canadian justice system on trial. The official inquiry that followed pretty much concluded that, yeah, it was a bad situation, but prosecutors had made a tough call. They called the deal a necessary evil to make sure Bernardo was convicted. But for a lot of Canadians, that just sounded like an excuse, like the system trying to save face after a catastrophic mistake.
So in this desperate attempt to control the chaos and make sure Bernardo could still get a fair trial, the court slapped a massive publication ban on the case. They muzzled the media, trying to keep the Canadian public in the dark. But, we're talking about the dawn of the internet age here, and secrets were getting a lot harder to keep.
Yeah, that publication ban, it turned out to be basically useless. American media, who didn't have to follow Canadian law, published everything. People were literally smuggling U.S. newspapers across the border. And the internet, even in its infancy,
became this wild west of information and rumors. The court tried to put a lid on it, but the genie was already way out of the bottle.
Okay, let's fast forward to 2005. After serving her 12 years, the woman at the very center of the deal with the devil was about to be released back into society, and you can bet the public was bracing for impact.
Now, Homolka served her full sentence, but not because she chose to. See, the parole board, in a really rare move, had denied her statutory release. That's the standard early release most inmates get, because they still considered her a threat. It was a small thing, I guess, but it wasn't justice.
Even when she got out, the court wasn't taking any chances. A judge put this long list of strict conditions on her freedom. It was basically a leash to try and keep her from hurting anyone else. But as we're about to see, even that leash wouldn't last very long. Just 5 months later, can you believe it? A higher court just cut her loose. The judge said there wasn't enough evidence to justify keeping the restrictions in place. And just like that, Karla Homolka was completely free to live a normal life, the kind of life that was stolen from her victims.
The Homolka case left this permanent scar on Canada's justice system. There was this huge fear that she might one day get a pardon and have her record wiped clean. So the government actually rushed through new laws to make it way harder for serious offenders to do that. Her case didn't just shock the nation, it literally changed the law.
In the end, there's just no happy ending to the Karla Homolka story. It's a story about a justice system that got played, a monster who manipulated her way to freedom, and the innocent lives that were destroyed. It really forces us to ask a tough question. When the truth comes out too late, what is the real price of justice? And is that a price we should ever be willing to pay?